So this is going to be one of two Dear America readings that we have planned heading into the presidential election, which takes place in just about 6 weeks. We look forward to seeing you in that event as well, and another that will be coming up just next week. As Simmons said, my name is Elizabeth Dodd, and I am coming to you from the Flint Hills region of Kansas. Kansas is the ancestral home of many Native nations, including the Kaw, the Osage, and the Pawnee. And the Flint Hills region is the largest intact tallgrass prairie region in North America. I want to thank Simmons, who is not feeling well tonight, and we should all wish him well. He's under the weather, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to host you all this evening. I want to thank our readers and Dear America contributors, Alison Hawthorne Deming, Lauret Savoy, and Suzanne Roberts. This is a reading in celebration of Dear America. I'm going to drop in the chat. This is the anthology that our authors tonight have appeared in, and we fear may be prescient for the coming election as well. We hope not. We will be giving away some signed copies of Dear America tonight. This is a book that was published on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day back in 2020. Thanks to our publisher, Trinity University Press. We have the free copies from us and a discount, a 20% discount that is available if you go to the link that I have just put in the chat. You can purchase the book, and on checkout, you can use the code DA for Dear America 20. It's a great deal and a great time to buy this important book. So tonight you will hear from Suzanne Roberts, Lauret Savoy, and Alison Deming, who will read in that order. I'll be introducing them just before they read, and we will leave time at the end for some conversation. If your connection becomes slow, you may want to turn off your video, although it's nice to see you folks. Hello, Derek. Good to see you. Hello, Stephen Trimble. You can turn off your video. In all cases, please do keep yourself muted, but you're welcome to post your questions and other positive feedback in the chat. Simmons is recording this and all our readings, and he will make these available from terrain.org and our YouTube channel pretty shortly. If you would love to officially follow our YouTube channel, I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Please do. We'd love to have you there. Our final Dear America reading with the theme of joy and humor is going to take place on Thursday, October the 24th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time. And the reading will be featuring Michael Branch, John T. Price, and Laura Jackson. And I'll go ahead and drop the registration link for that one. You might want to go ahead and register. It should be a terrific evening. And then we'll hold our collective progressive breath until and maybe beyond Tuesday, November the 5th. But it's no small thing to have hope and joy and activism on behalf of democracy and friends. That's what Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy is all about. A few more quick announcements, please, about terrain.org. The deadline for our 3rd annual Sowell Emerging Writers Prize, in concert with the Sowell Family Collection in Literature, Community, and the Natural World, and Texas University Press, Texas Tech University Press, is November the 15th. This year, we are accepting manuscripts of fiction, both story collections and novels. There's a $25 entry fee for a prize of $1,000 and publication by Texas Tech University Press. And you can find more information in the link I'm dropping in the chat or on Submittable. Please share this with your friends. We look forward to seeing terrific submissions from far and wide. Our regular submission period for poetry, nonfiction, and fiction is not open yet. That will begin on January the 1st, but our Letter to America series submissions are open year-round, and if you are inspired by this evening or any day in the coming weeks, please do feel free to send us your submission through Submittable. Now, let's turn to tonight's reading, and it will be followed by Q&A. We'll be posting some terrain.org publication and book links in the chat, and so you can click on those, follow along with some of the readings, and see some of the other work that our authors have done. So again, thank you for joining us, and let me introduce our first reader this evening, Suzanne Roberts. Suzanne is a longtime contributor to terrain.org and a two-time letter writer for the Letter to America series. She's the author of Animal Bodies, On Death, Desire, and Other Difficulties, Bad Tourist, Misadventures in Love and Travel, and my favorite of her books, Almost Somewhere, 28 Days on the John Muir Trail, which was winner of the 2012 National Outdoor Book Award and is just recently published in a new edition in 2023. As well, she is the author of 4 collections of poems. She's named the next great travel writer by the National Geographic Traveler, and her work has been named as a notable in Best American Essays and included in the Best Women's Travel Writing. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Plowshares, National Geographic, Traveler, Creative Nonfiction, Brevity, River Teeth, and elsewhere. She holds a doctorate in literature and environment from the University of Nevada, Reno, and she teaches in the low residency MFA program. Actually, you don't do that anymore, Suzanne, do you? I think this is an old bio.
No, I do. I teach at UNR Tahoe.
Then let me continue with this introduction.
Yeah, I still do.
She does teach at UNR Tahoe, and she lives with her husband in South Lake Tahoe, California. She's currently at work on a creative writing craft book that's based on her newsletter, 52 Writing Prompts. Suzanne, will you please read to us?
Of course. Thank you so much for that introduction, Elizabeth, and Simmons, thank you. And thanks to everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. So I'll just go ahead and get started. This piece is called Burning Man in a Warming World. And I wrote it after the Muddy Man that we had last year. This year, the weather was beautiful. But as many of you probably heard on the news, there was a rainstorm and people were stranded out there. And I'll read a little bit more about that. Okay. Burning Man in a Warming World. I don dust goggles and a face mask, ride my neon flashing pink cruiser across the dark, dusty streets and into the open playa. I reach the Thunderdome, where cage fighters swing on cables from an open dome toward opponents. A delighted crowd clings to the metal ribcage, watching the dusty skirmish below. Tonight is even more lively at the Thunderdome because it's DPW Friends and Family Night. DPW is Burning Man's Department of Public Works, the group responsible for building, maintaining, and supporting the physical infrastructure of Black Rock City, the temporal city in Nevada's Black Rock Desert, where Burning Man takes place. DPW comes out to the playa a month early to build the city, and then they stay after everything's over, ensuring the adherence of leave no trace principles. Most of DPW are volunteers, and without them, there would be no Burning Man. The many jobs I've volunteered for over the nearly 2 decades of attending Burning Man are important. Greeting at the gate, mixing drinks and tending bar, delivering mail, helping out with art tours, performing poetry and burlesque. But none are so vital as the hard and dirty work DPW does. And tonight, they've taken over the Thunderdome, adding to the fervor of the already post-punk Mad Max hardcore vibe. Thrash metal music, thrash metal music blasts, the leather-clad audience dances and cheers, and a banner reads, "This ain't no goddamn country club." The scene might not be the picture Instagram spectators have of Burning Man, those scantily clothed sparkle pony supermodels arrayed in G-strings and floating diaphanous wings, all glitter and dust. No, this is a scene straight from a post-apocalyptic novel or film, though the mixed gender fighters wield soft bats and the spectacle is more playful than anything else. A gladiator match set in the future where scrappers emerge, mostly unscathed, thriving on dust and adrenaline. I gaze at the feral scene thinking, so this is how we do it. We can only survive the apocalypse with a fierce community connection, creative improvisation, and a serious devotion to play. The Thunderdome on DPW Friends and Family Night is only one version of Burning Man, as I could have easily spent my evening dancing to Motown, attending a sober spa party, learning the biology of fairy shrimp, or practicing inflatable goat yoga, all interactive events and activities that have been gifted by the community. Every year, the week leading up to Labor Day, Black Rock City, a metropolis complete with a post office and radio station, airport and recycling center, mini golf course and a roller skating rink, boutiques and nightclubs, and tons of interactive public art, is erected in the desert and then disappears virtually without a trace. Burning Man isn't so much a festival as a fully functioning volunteer-run city, one more populous than Nevada's capital city. At Burning Man, pop-up dance parties hosted by moving golden fire-breathing dragons or Mayan warriors serve as symbols of our fleeting world, a celebration of human creativity in the face of impermanence, but also an object lesson on the ways we might live more sustainably, letting go of our outdated devotion to permanence. Burning Man culminates with a conflagration devouring a wooden effigy, the eponymous man, and the quieter epilogue of the burning temple, a sacred space where people have left shrines to their dead. But these spectacles celebrate impermanence and the fleeting nature of the things we build, proving we really can leave the land exactly as we found it. To date, Burning Man is the largest Leave No Trace event in the world. Burning Man participants, or burners, bring everything needed to survive one of the harshest landscapes in the world: intense sun and heat, freezing nighttime temperatures, dust storms, cyclones, and, as you may have heard, intense rainfall and lots of mud. During rainstorms, the fine alkaline dust quickly turns to muck that will clog bicycle tires, car, and RV axles and adhere to boots in a sticky mess, rendering a short walk difficult to impossible. Last year, it rained on an already saturated playa. Exaggerated media reports, heavy on Schadenfreude and light on reality, as well as conspiracy-filled social media posts, cue Ebola, made the situation seem like a disaster, and it might have been if the flooding had happened elsewhere in America. Yet, burners knew they weren't at a goddamn country club. They understood that they were out in nature where weather happens. Despite missives from the outside world, many burners praised the community that had pulled together. Others claimed that the muddy burn was the best they had ever experienced because of the ways everyone shared food and water, food, water, and shelter, drawing people more closely together in an already bonded community. What happened during the flooding at Burning Man is an example of what's already coming for all our cities in this era of extreme temperatures, drought, mega fires, hurricanes, and an expanding tornado alley. The decommodification of our gifts at Burning Man means that we offer them in a spirit of playfulness and love, so unlike our late-stage capitalistic transactions where everything is for sale. While it's true natural disasters often draw communities together, capitalism often divides us, making a situation much harder for the least privileged among us. In my many years of attending Burning Man, I've been invited into strangers' RVs to escape dust storms, escorted back to my camp in whiteout conditions, gifted everything from showers and bicycle repair to snow cones, pickles, and free hugs. In return, I've offered meals, water, and wine, rides off the playa, and even opened my house to people I had just met so they could regroup before traveling home. In contrast, during a recent wildfire evacuation from my home in South Lake Tahoe, the surrounding hotels quadrupled their prices, meeting with the frantic demand with overpriced supply. During the rains at Burning Man, however, participants freely opened their RVs to those sleeping in tents. We already know that the consequences of severe weather events are not egalitarian, and if our society encouraged more gifting, those who have more resources might be inclined to help others in need. If we have any hope of getting through the Anthropocene, we should take Black Rock City as a case in point. While radical self-expression might not seem important when we consider our response to natural disasters, the reality is that if we were allowed to present ourselves in our most authentic ways, and others were as well, our social groups would not isolate and neglect others we deem different from ourselves. At Burning Man, it's allowable, encouraged even, to step outside societal constraints and norms, creating a safe environment among all participants where camaraderie replaces shame. By celebrating each individual, we create a more caring collective. If we're to express our true natures, we are happier, and happy people make the world a better, safer place. On our way back from the DPW night at the Thunderdome, we rode the dark streets, neon flashing bicycles glowing in a swirl of dust. My friend Marnie said, "Stop and check this out." We pulled over to a man at the Rogue National Village playing a concert on an upright piano suspended high above on chains. A rope net stretched below him, presumably to catch him if he fell. Dancers spun fire at the camp next door in time with the piano melody. Gazing up at the musician, I knew this moment in time would never happen again. Not exactly like this. And that's how Burning Man feels, moment after moment, where you happen to catch a concert played in suspension or join a dance party on your way back to camp after using the porta potty in the middle of the night. Face-to-face encounters feel like serendipity because everything is a happy coincidence, a meeting of time and space that will never be repeated. Not quite like that, ever again. While it's true that Black Rock City is a temporary city whose elaborate social and physical infrastructure lasts only until the day after the temple burn, this fleeting city begs the question in regards to the actual permanence of all cities. Systems we take for granted, the power grid, clean drinking water, the ability to safely travel, may not be reliable during severe weather events. How might we reconsider our own communities and civic duties if we believed our towns and cities could disappear without a trace? How might we pull together in our own communities and use our collective creativity to improvise? Burning Man provides visionary approaches to societal issues, and as a result, many worldwide community initiatives have already taken root at Burning Man, such as Burners Without Borders, founded in response to Hurricane Katrina. Burners Without Borders has grown into a community-led, nonprofit organization facilitating disaster relief programs and supporting community resilience and grassroots humanitarian resources, including 32 groups comprised of 1,300 volunteers across the globe. Burning Man is often called counterculture. Maybe it's time to take the lessons of this unique social experiment, examining the ways in which our American culture has lived counter to both the environment and the basic tenets of our human communities. Burning Man enables us to envision a future where there's more love for one another and for the planet, one that might even include post-apocalyptic, Mad Max-style cage fighters and fishnet stockings and dusty leather chaps. A vision of the world that is more friendly than frightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that playful and insightful letter. I love that piece. Let's turn now to Lauret Savoy, an amazing human who contributed a New Year's Day letter to America in 2018. And I'll drop that link in the chat as well. Lauret Savoy's research and writing consider how the nation's ever-unfolding history has marked both the land and the people. Trace, Memory, History, Race, and the American Landscape won the American Book Award. It was also a finalist for PEN American and many additional honors. Her other books include The Colors of Nature, Culture, Identity, and the Natural World, co-edited with Alison Hawthorne Deming, and Bedrock, Writers on the Wonders of Geology, which was named one of the 5 best science books in the Wall Street Journal. Lauret writes of the complex intertwinings of natural and cultural histories to understand the American land's origins and the stories we tell ourselves in this land. A woman of African American, Euro-American, and Indigenous heritages, Lauret is the David B. Truman Professor of Environmental Studies and Geology at Mount Holyoke College, winner of Mount Holyoke's Distinguished Teaching Award and an Andrew Carnegie Fellowship. Lauret has held fellowships at the Smithsonian Institution and Yale University. She was also elected a Fellow of the Geological Society of America and is currently a Fellow of Harvard University's Warren Center for Studies in American History. Please welcome Lauret. Lauret, will you read to us?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone here. I see some old friends, and we've been out of contact for a long time. I'm just grateful that you're here. I truly am. And thank you, Simmons, for inviting me. And it's wonderful to rejoin this community after being away from it for a few years. I'm speaking from the hills of Western Massachusetts by the Connecticut River Valley. This is ancestral homeland of the Pocumtuck people at the crossroads of Abenaki homeland to the north and Nonotuck to the south. And it's also a region whose economy grew from the labors of enslaved captives over centuries. And the lingering remnants of that economy, of those lifeways, still can be found in the land here. Now, the letter I wrote, I updated it in August 19 to be part of this wonderful collection in the middle of the Trump administration. And I have to admit that I had not read it for quite a while until preparing for this evening. And returning to these rough words after so long felt like a hard blow. And so while I would probably write something very different now, I'd like to share with you that letter that began a few years ago. And it's addressed to my country. An old and perhaps unanswerable question has troubled me since childhood. Now it won't let me rest. The Revolutionary War had entered its final years, still undecided, when J. Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur asked, "What then is the American, this new man?" Most of the soon-to-be former colonists would probably agree with his response, published in 1782 in Letters from an American Farmer. In his words, he is either an European or the descendant of an European, who, leaving behind him all his ancient prejudices and manners, receives new ones from the new mode of life he has embraced, the new government he obeys, and the new rank he holds. He makes a new race of men whose labors and posterity will one day cause great changes in the world. End quote. Of course, we realize that so many others were excluded from his definition. Women, indigenous peoples, free people of color, as well as 1/5 the population of the fledgling United States, whose labors had driven the economies of all 13 colonies. For slavery and its profits, whether from tobacco, cotton, sugar, or rice, buttressed the new republic. National prosperity would continue to depend on exploiting people as cheap labor and exploiting land once dispossessed of its original inhabitants. Part and parcel of this new mode of life were adaptive prejudices, concepts of race, of whiteness, of white supremacy. The social and political community that founding property holders imagined as the new nation had to be carefully guarded. Although recent assaults on this country's civil society might seem unprecedented, de Crèvecoeur's question has always been contested ground. Any expanding membership in the imagined community of we, the people, was answered time and again by tightened boundaries. Radical Reconstruction, for instance, defined and broadened the reach of U.S. citizenship with the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th and 15th constitutional amendments. Those men once enslaved could now, in principle, enjoy equal protection under the law without regard to race. They could own land, they could run for office, they could vote, until the surge toward justice fell with and after the compromised presidential election of 1876. A retrenching racial hierarchy promised white redemption, and not only in the South. It would take the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to make into law again what had been gutted when Reconstruction was abandoned. And the era of Jim Crow would also see immigration quotas. In the spring of 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, the first major federal law restricting immigration. That statute, with its extensions, would stand in force for 6 decades in the name of racial purity. As a child, I often stumbled over the phrase, "with liberty and justice for all," wondering if there was an elastic limit to realized citizenship while my schoolmates recited the Pledge of Allegiance. These 6 words seemed at odds with media images that were ceaseless. TV news alone brought into our home each night footage of war, assassinations, and protests by people who looked like me. I came of age doubting claims of incremental progress, yet still wanting to believe in expanding tolerance, if not acceptance and equality. But I wasn't so naive as to believe the nation had entered a post-racial, post-racist age with Barack Obama's presidency. Not when white supremacists and hate groups proliferated after his election. Not when an opportunistic presidential campaign in 2016 could exalt ignorance, suspicion, and fear to feed racism, xenophobia, and misogyny, and win. Not when many white voters of all economic classes perceived that campaign's promise to be redemption. In the age of Trump, the clock has turned back yet again on civil rights. The rule of power and profit reigns supreme. White nativists vilify Muslim, Mexican, and other non-white immigrants as alien. A nuclear arms race and other military threats escalate. Environmental regulations and protected lands fall prey to oil and gas plunder or mining. Climate science and language are censored despite global changes more rapid than predicted. And perceptions of race cut sharper, more divisive lines. Taking back the country to make America great again can mean many things. One, of course, is the monochromatic need of whiteness to believe this nation is what it never was, except in the minds and rhetoric of those longing for it to be so. Their public memory requires amnesia and selective erasure of peoples and cultures long part of the American experience. It is tempting here to exhort, to warn, to urge, to insist. We must, we should, we need to. But changing any situation for the better requires knowing what it really is. And key to this, I believe, is comprehending how forms of othering have always been central to the democratic project that is the United States. The seeming paradox between an American creed of liberty and justice for all and the realities of an American promise denied to members of marginalized groups is instead a malignant symbiosis. Transgression in word and deed, the root meaning of outrage, has occurred each day in the polarizing age of Trump. One step toward confronting and defying injustice begins with grasping the paradox and contradiction in the heartwood of this society. Innocence is not an option. Neither is hopelessness. The first documented arrival of Africans in the English colonies on mainland North America took place in August 1619. 400 years later, I don't know if we, the people, can acknowledge with honesty our intercultural past to present and admit many varied responses to who is an American. I had hoped, though, that more than half a century after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., this nation might see itself more clearly. Sincerely yours, Lauret Edith Savoy.
Lauret, thank you, as always, for the clarity, the truth, the wisdom, and ultimately the generosity with which you guide us through this intercultural landscape that is America. Thank you. It's my pleasure next to introduce a splendid writer and utterly stalwart supporter of Terrain.org, Alison Hawthorne Deming. She wrote the original letter to America that is the impetus for the collection, Dear America, plus 3 other letters to America, including our first and only so far letter to America in the form of a book review. And I'll drop one of her links into the chat. She's the author of 6 books of poetry and 5 books of nonfiction, with the poetry collection Blue Flax and Yellow Mustard Flower, and the anthology The Gift of Animals, Poems of Love, Loss, and Connection, coming out in the spring of 2025. A recipient of Guggenheim and NEA fellowships, she is the Regents Professor Emerita at the University of Arizona. Will you please welcome Alison Hawthorne Deming? And Alison, will you please read to us?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's so good to be here and see so many friends and writers that I love. Lauret, magnificent. Thank you. Your voice is so important. And Suzanne, I've never been to Burning Man. Thanks. I love that piece of yours. I'm going to read, at Simmons' suggestion, the initial letter, because we do want to bring attention back to this book. If you don't have it, you might want it. And if you do have it, you might want to get it as a gift. And then I wrote another letter to America yesterday. So there'll be 2 short letters and very, very different in tone, because I wasn't about to repeat myself. And I do like the spirit of joy that has come into the campaign for the first time in a long time in our country. But this one was written in November of 2016. Dear America, the heat is just beginning to wane here in Arizona in the November ending the hottest 5 years on record. I've had to adjust my inner thermostat too, living here in terrain associated in many of the world's religions with spiritual testing. The election results threaten to undermine every cause that I, as an educator, poet, and essayist, have worked on in the past 50 years. Women's rights, civil rights, environmental justice, science literacy, civil discourse, and empathy. And underlying all, the informed and reflective thinking required for democracy to thrive. Only 25% of the American electorate voted for Donald Trump. That means 75% of Americans did not vote for deportation of Mexicans, banning of Muslims, denigrating and denying science, wasting the glorious planet for the sake of personal and corporate gain, hate speech, racist and misogynist words and deeds, and autocratic decision-making. The reasons that only 25% of Americans voted for Hillary Clinton will become more clear, possibly, though some elements of that will remain opaque forever. The reasons that the remaining 50% of Americans did not vote for any candidate include despair, cynicism, principle, and challenges to the right to vote. I will not castigate non-voters. I will praise them for not voting for a dangerous, ill-informed, disrespectful, undignified, greedy, and hateful bully. The fact that 75% of Americans did not vote for this candidate makes clear that Trump values are not American values. This vote says that whatever the reasons might have been for not voting, we need you now to avow your majority position in being publicly vigilant, articulate, respectful of difference, and caring toward the most vulnerable among our people and creatures with whom we share the planet. We have seen language used to manipulate people, distort reality, deny facts, and betray our American ideals of liberty and justice. We need now to believe in the power of language to help us connect across our differences, express empathy, form new alliances, and fuel our better natures, and live more fully the values we espouse. Surely, surprising acts of resistance will rise from the spirit of resilience and solidarity, energized by this dangerous turn in American leadership. I think of this remembering the symbolic power of an action taken just days after the terrorist attacks in Paris in November 2015, when public protests were banned. 10,000 pairs of shoes were lined up in the Place de la République, shoes from Pope Francis, shoes from the Dalai Lama, shoes of the living, and shoes of the dead. They stood in for the 200,000 people anticipated to gather on Paris streets ahead of the Paris Climate Summit. So sure, take to the streets, sign petitions, move to a red state and run for the school board, donate to organizations that work on the local level or promote human rights. Think of the great spirit of inventiveness the earth calls forth after each major disturbance it suffers. Be artful, inventive, and just, my friends, but do not be silent. September 2024. Dear America, it's been too long since I've written. It pains me to know you've been bullied, betrayed, misrepresented, death threats left in a basket at your door. Each attempt to heal from these abuses gets met with more cruelty. Threats of vengeance have become a currency with which the abusers hope to buy the future. The planet be damned. It's hard to know what to say when so much has been said so well, and yet the vitriol continues. All I can do is start with the day. This morning, early autumn, walking on an empty sand beach in the north, I was startled to see animal tracks in the wet sand, dog beside human, then smaller, sharper, but similar paw prints marked with claws digging into sand. River otter, and the dog sniffing its way, you could see from its prints along the scent trail. Then pointed divots of deer hooves as they too had come out of the woods to explore, perhaps get a lick of salt off the beach. I was feeling rich in that moment, knowing the wild ones were here and sorry that my arrival may have sent them back into the cover of scrub. Met a guy walking towards me, sweatshirt and yellow earbuds. Good morning. Good morning. There's dead krill all over the beach. Really? That's weird. Then I saw them. They were scattered like dead leaves, but brighter, shiny, glassine, like skinny, translucent shrimp. The food seabirds, baleen whales, sharks, and seals eat. Kill the krill, and the damage ramifies all the way up the food chain. The man took out one earbud, pointed to the salmon cages offshore. I used to dive there. I don't have anything good to say about them, I replied. I had a friend who did that job for a few years. She made the mort dives, which meant lowering down into the feedlot of farmed salmon to cull out the dead ones, contaminating the crop. This feedlot is in open seawater, so spoiled feed, feces, medication all permeate the water and the ocean floor like a toxic plume. They just dosed them, he said. Got to bring the fish farms on land. They're doing it in BC. These will be gone soon too. I hope so. Earbud back in. A few feet farther along the beach, a dead harbor seal, red flesh exposed where the plush fur had peeled partially away. Enough fur remaining, mottled black and silver gray, to imagine it as a coat. Probably shot, a competitor to the multinational corporation that runs the fish farms. It's an unfair competition. All the seal wants is to make a living. The corporation wants to make more money than it takes to make a living. There's a phenomenon in nature called surplus killing, as when hyenas go on a spree, taking down more gazelles than they can possibly eat, just for the joy of killing, a kind of temporary insanity, for it is insane to destroy the source of one's sustenance. Where am I going with this? I thought I had found a metaphor for the election. Trump and Vance are dead krill and toxic salmon and slaughtered seals. Harris and Waltz are wild deer and otters, people and dogs out for a morning stroll on the beach. Which side are you on? Good for a laugh, but America. How do I speak to that part of you that finds the whole system so corrupt? The buying of votes, the injustices of justice, weapons mongering, domestic and global, the pontificating of political piety. You'd just rather not participate, as if not participating had anything to do with making things better. But heck, you don't really believe they can get better, so you'll just sit this one out. Okay, let me try another metaphor. The dinner menu. You've been invited out to dinner by the person who means the most to you in the world. Your lover, your mentor, your mother, Karl Marx, Ayn Rand, Kid Rock. When you see the menu, you know you're in trouble. You are a raw foodist, raw meat and milk, raw vegetables, homemade kombucha. The menu offers two choices: bologna sandwich on Wonder Bread or farm-raised salmon with lemon caper sauce. Both are unacceptable to you. But you have to eat because the social contract you signed by accepting the invitation requires it. It's really not hard to tell which is the better meal. Implausible analogy. Let's try another. Outlaw. America loves its outlaws. Gangsters, thugs, maniacs, hipster crooks. Butch and Sundance, Serpico, The Godfather, Ocean's 11, such fun. Every week, a new rapist on Law and Order SVU, Mad Max, Fury Road. Do we watch to see the skill and glee of criminals, to see the crime solved, the criminal held accountable, the law upheld? Do we watch to face the reality of human cruelty and violence, the desire in us to be a transgressor? Do we watch to prepare ourselves for the fall of law and order, fearful that moral and legal constraints will fail us? The problem with the outlaw analogy is that this election is not a television show or a movie. This is real life. Outlaw is not a metaphor. An outlaw is running for president, enabled by a political party taken over by outlaws. For if you aid and abet a violent insurrection to take over the United States government, you are an outlaw and ready to throw out any laws that do not suit your insatiable need for attention and power. So, dear America, consider my letter an intervention. You are in trouble, and those who love you, I mean, really love you for what's beautiful about you, even for your flaws, have come to tell you that we will carry you through this crisis. We will not let you fall. And dear reader, if I have failed to give you confidence in that pledge of allegiance, please submit your metaphor here. With love, Alison Hawthorne Deming.
Oh, Alison, thank you for your fierce encouragement and your metaphors.
Well, bring
And
them
for,
on.
and for everything you have done in support of democracy of place. Gentle people, let's turn to Q&A. So here is where folks can win one of 2 signed copies of Dear America. The first 2 questions that are addressed to all 3 readers this evening will receive a signed copy of Dear America. So be typing out those questions, drop them in the chat, fling up your hand for me to call on you. Although I can't actually see everybody on the same screen at once. So fling them in the chat. And while people are typing, I can see this is an educated, brainy bunch. They need long questions. While we are waiting for them, I'll pose a question to the group, and I am not eligible for one of these free books. Oh, nope, putting my question back in my back pocket. Scott Anderson has the first question. How hopeful are you about the election? Gentle people?
Is that for all of us?
It is, because otherwise he's ineligible.
Oh,
for-
okay. Okay.
for the free book.
I am so much more hopeful than I was a few months ago. And especially after the DNC, I was so jazzed and hopeful. And I go between being hopeful and sheer panic at what could happen. And I'm mostly hopeful because I live in California, where I live in a bubble, and I feel like there's no way, there's no way that Trump would get back in. But I know that's not true about the rest of the country. And so I do flip-flop between hopeful and sheer panic.
Well, yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, certainly, very, very thrilled with the energy that Harris and Walz have brought to the country, and that they've been able to mobilize a lot of folks, hopefully, especially youth vote, that people who haven't voted, and thanks to Taylor Swift and all that stuff, great, bring them on. So I should say that I make a decision to be hopeful, because the thought of the other thing happening is so profoundly terrifying. I just can't go there. It's like thinking about nuclear war. At some point you have to shut down that possibility. So I've made a decision to be hopeful, and also to try to help others be hopeful, because when we lose the hope, then we don't want to do anything. We don't want to put our words to the page. We don't want to encourage anybody to get out and vote. We don't want to get into the hard conversations. So just making the decision to be hopeful is my little trick to myself to keep from, falling into the chasm of doom.
I would say that I'm also hopeful, and I hesitated in responding to the question because I know some friends who say they're hopeful, yet there's a passive hopeful. I think what's necessary is an active hopeful, and doing everything that a person can to help this, the electorate, choose a path that honors democracy. But being hopeful and hoping that all things will work out, that's too passive. I mean, Michelle Obama said, do something. Oprah said, do something. So many, Kamala Harris as well, and Tim Walz. I think it's combining hope with making that hope active. And if more people could do that, then I would be more hopeful. But it's the passivity that scares me too.
Thanks for that question, Scott. Thanks for those answers. Can I just point back to something that Alison said in her first letter? One of her do something suggestions was move to a red state and run for the school board. I live in Kansas, where John Brown came from New York to change the world, where a number of the New England immigrants came to change the world. Land prices are cheap compared to lots of places. Y'all come on over. We'd be glad to have you. Second question to come into the chat was from Amy Thompson. What is a piece of advice you wish you had known as a new writer? Anybody want to? All three, or she's not eligible.
No, it's easy for me. It's a lifelong apprenticeship. So just, chill and give yourself the long view and don't freak out. I'm not famous by the time I'm 30. Oh my God. So yeah, a lifelong apprenticeship is a helpful way to think about your writing life for me.
You're here. And I wish I had had you as my teacher, Alison. I would have begun believing in myself at an earlier age than I wish I had. It's also recognizing that the journey that you're on is going to have many bumps and roads and detours, and some things completely throw you for a loop and throw you, literally derail you. But that doesn't mean to give up. So it's keeping at it and believing even when you don't believe.
Yeah, I think that I would tell my younger self that that I will always have imposter syndrome. I will always think that what I write in the first draft is terrible. I will always think that I can't pull things off. And I know now, right, that I can pull things off and that I'm not an imposter. So I have that to sort of, answer to that negative voice. But I wish I knew then that that's how we all feel. Like we all feel that way our whole career. And I like the thing that that Alison said about the sort of the long game. Like, it's not just one essay or one poem or one book, but it's like a whole, bunch of books and a whole bunch of essays. And so don't ever worry about one thing too much. So that would be my advice. And I love to give advice, so I could go on, but I won't.
Thanks for the question, Amy, and thanks to the panel. We got a couple more questions that I think are related in the chat. Mary Oak is asking, for those of you who are teachers, do you see complacency in your students? And if so, how do you deal with it? And then another question, wondering from Andy Furman, wondering how you all may address and combat the othering that Lauret engaged with in her letter in your teaching or in your life generally. Some really rich questions that intersect.
I'll begin, Elizabeth, because I think that Mary's question also speaks to the earlier question as well about hopefulness. I would say that the students with whom I work, and I've been away from teaching for a bit, and now that I'm back, I can see again why it's my students who help keep me alive and motivated and learning. I'm as much their student as they are mine. They are not complacent. They are very much aware of the nation they are inheriting and the political environment that they are inheriting. And they are extremely active in ways that I couldn't have imagined being when I was a college student. So in my case, I'm working with students who have the fire lit under them, and they're trying to get the fire relit under some of the older people at Mount Holyoke College. So I don't need to worry about them.
Suzanne, Allison?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm only teaching grad students now, so they're not complacent. I did see when I taught undergraduate, I did see complacency in, in both wanting to learn to write and also the political world. But I don't see that now. And then I liked the question about like how do you address the othering? And I think the best way to address it is to address it, to just be honest about it. And I teach a lot of creative writing, and I talk a lot about like, why are you writing this thing? Why are you writing it now? And why are you the person to write it, right? And there's certain things I'm not the person to write, right? Like somebody else, would be the person to write. Somebody maybe that would be from a marginalized community, or from, or someone who's younger, or someone who's older, or someone who's a person of color. So I just address it. I also make sure that in everything I teach that there's representation, so that, I make sure that like every student can see him or herself in the examples I give and the work I give. I'm working on a creative writing craft book right now, and trying very hard to make sure that any person who opens that book will find an example from a writer that comes from where they come from, looks like they look, has had their life experience. Because I can't give that to them, but I can give it to them by telling them what to read. So.
Well, I'm not teaching full-time anymore, but I haven't really experienced a lot of complacency, frustration, certainly with the mess that the world is in, and how poorly my generation has done with all of its activism to, make things significantly better, but not complacent. And, writers, students who want to study writing, most of them want to make a difference in some way. They want to find meaning, want to make a difference. They want to be able to reach others. So they have a kind of motivation that maybe other students don't have. I don't know, but I don't see complacency as an issue. I like what Susan says about the same for me with teaching. But the other thing is that of course, in teaching creative nonfiction, we talk a lot about narrative voice. And sometimes, the students will be writing in the first person singular, I this, I that, and there's no sense of cultural context that they come from. And so I tell everybody, and especially white students, what's the cultural context within which this happens? And that's yours to define as you wish. And I have all kinds of exercises in looking at the different ways that we talk about culture. And so I think really good essays are deeply personal and deeply enriched by a cultural context. And so that's always been a kind of core thing with my teaching. And I hope it helps for them to develop a richer sense of culture. And the other thing is, I've lived and taught in Tucson for 35 years, and Tucson is a multicultural city, a wonderfully multicultural city. And I have done a lot of listening since I'm a 10th generation New Englander. I have done a lot of listening since I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I have learned a great deal, and I still have a great deal to learn, particularly from my Native American and Latinx students. And I feel like that's been really a major part of my American education, is living in a region where that's possible. And mentoring those students to get their voices out there. I mean, it's amazingly talented students have gotten important books out, and I couldn't be more satisfied to see them rising up on the page.
Thanks for those terrific questions, guys. Yeah, please go ahead, Lauret.
I was holding off on touching on Andrew's question about othering, because I wanted to hear what others said. I would also add that one of the things a couple of things I do with students is to help them recognize how otherings through time exist in the present, and how the history of experience in this country on the land among different peoples, of peoples in conflict, is not just something that happened in the past, that it exists today. And so one thing we do is to consider just the assumed language that everyone has when they're speaking. And I'm not talking about writing, but just how we navigate as individuals in the world we're in a day. And we consider how many assumptions then people have that go unexamined, and how so many of the assumptions really are based on inculcated divisions, us from them, you from me, and recognizing, well, why is that division there? And having them think about it from their own experiences. And so in that way, they begin to recognize that even though they want to understand a community together, how even the language and understandings that are based on education and the experiences of growing up in this country have boundaries in them that need to be examined and need to be erased. And that's part of what I do.
This is terrific conversation. Anybody else? More questions? Well, let me draw your attention, please, in the chat. Simmons put in the information for how to get your 20% discount for a copy of Dear America. I want to thank this audience. Thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you for bringing your energy, your ears, your hearts, and I hope your feet as you go out to do the work before the election. Thank you so much to Suzanne, Lauret, and Alison for sharing your work, your insight, and your courage and your wit.